Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Catholic Vote. On today's episode, we're going to be tackling the issue of immigration. Well, my brothers and sisters, welcome back. As on this episode, episode 5, we're going to be tackling the issue of immigration. Immigration often causes individuals to be fired up on either side of the aisle, but we're going to try to approach this issue with an authentic Catholic perspective. But before we jump in, just want to thank all those who have reached out to me with positive and maybe some not so positive comments concerning this series. We appreciate, no matter what your perspective is, you taking time to watch, really think, and pray about these issues. Of course, some of you are a little upset, and that's okay. Sometimes the church, when she presents her teachings, are going to cause some people to have to take a step back. But I invite you to take everything that I say, everything that the church teaches, to prayer. You know, it's been amazing. We've seen over the first 4 episodes, 11,000 views now of those first 4 episodes. So we're just so thankful that this series is impacting people from West Tennessee to North Carolina to Texas to right here in Northwest Ohio. So thank you so much for being here. Now, on the issue of immigration, let me just go over the outline for today's show. First, I just want to talk about 3 foundational Catholic principles when it comes to this issue. That'll give us kind of a good base as we go through the rest of the show. Secondly, I want to take a look at our current situation, kind of what's going on in our Southern Hemisphere, why there's individuals immigrating to the United States of America, and then we're going to take a look at some concrete numbers. Number 3, then I just want to provide a few important church quotes on the issue of immigration for us to reflect upon. Number 4, then we'll take a look at the party platforms. What do they have to say about immigration? And which party platform really encompasses the fullness or approaches the fullness of Catholic social teaching? Because neither party is going to fully encapsulate what the Catholic Church has to offer. Number 5, then, as I've ended each one of the episodes, and I want to continue to do so, is an invitation to be the saint that God has called you to be. And that's how we treat everyone on this issue, not only immigrants, whether they're documented or undocumented, legal or illegal, but how we treat each other, especially those with different opinions or thoughts, not only on the issue of immigration, but every issue we find in our modern discourse and these issues of consequence in our country today. Look, we as Catholics, it's so incumbent upon us to be a part of the solution. And being a part of the solution is caring for one another and how we treat one another. And it's so disheartening. For example, I saw on the news when the president, Donald Trump, and the First Lady, Melania Trump, were diagnosed with COVID-19, that some individuals were actually wishing negative things towards them. We can't stoop to that level as a country and as a nation, and certainly not as Catholics. And just because one person may do it at one point does not give anybody else an excuse to then do the same thing that they abhor. We have to be people of love, of truth, and of goodness. So let us pray for each of our candidates in this year's election. So some guiding principles on the issue of immigration. The first is this: it's the dignity of the human person. That's what we started this whole entire episode on, because we realize that all of Catholic social teaching flows from the reality that we're made in the image and likeness of God. So that means every person we disagree with, and every immigrant, whether again they're documented or undocumented, legal or illegal, is made in the image and likeness of God and is deserving then of some fundamental rights and fundamental respect. The second principle is this: that a sovereign nation has a right and a duty to protect its own borders. In fact, it has a responsibility to. It's why, if you will, we have locks on our homes, if you will. It's to keep our families safe. So too, if our nation can't protect its borders, it ceases to be a nation. It has a duty to protect its citizens. As Pope Francis himself even said, can borders be controlled? Yes, each country has a right to control its borders, who enters and who leaves, and countries that are in danger of terrorism or the like have more right to control them more. The last principle that we should apply to immigration if we're a Catholic is simply this. And I'll read directly here from the Catechism of the Catholic Church 2241. The more prosperous nations are obliged, to the extent that they are able, to welcome the foreigner in search of the security and the means of livelihood which he cannot find in his country of origin. So the last principle is just very simply, we're called to welcome the foreigner in our midst. It's a very biblical concept we too often disregard. So these three guiding principles are really key when we approach immigration policy as Catholics. The first, again, is the dignity of every human person. The second is that a sovereign nation has a right and a duty to control its borders. And then lastly, the fact that more prosperous nations are called to welcome the foreigner in their midst. I really invite you, when it comes to this issue of immigration, to reject the extremes on either side of this issue. We shouldn't be a nation that just simply has borders everywhere and doesn't allow anybody in, nor should we be a nation that doesn't have any borders at all and allows anybody to come at any time. To be a sovereign nation, we need laws. Otherwise, we're not a nation itself. But to be a compassionate nation, we also need to be able to reach out to those who find themselves in desperate circumstances. So our current situation, why are people immigrating to the United States? Well, I think the reality points to the fact that the United States is an incredibly free and prosperous nation. And people are still literally dying to get into our country because the country is so amazing. Certainly, like a lot of countries, we have our flaws, but we can't deny that the United States of America has been a beacon of freedom and prosperity for the entire world. But one of the reasons that individuals immigrate to the United States is really the issue of safety. According to Justice for Immigrants from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, safety is one of the concerns that drive people to immigrate. In 2016, the Northern Triangle, composed of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, was named one of the most violent regions in the world. All three Northern Triangle countries record thousands of crimes by local and international gangs and armed criminal groups. Most crimes are met with impunity. It is estimated that 10% of the Northern Triangle's population has already left, and it is likely that many more will flee, in part due to extreme violence. So safety is one of the main issues that drive people to leave, but probably the primary issue which drives people to immigrate would be for a better economic life. So whether it's permanent or seasonal, a commonly cited reason for migration is the economy. People are just simply searching for better jobs. And so they come to the United States, even sometimes to earn pennies on the dollar, so they could send back money back to their homeland to care for their family. Lastly, you can't overlook environmental factors as well, such as natural disasters, which cause people to immigrate. In Haiti, for example, in 2010, there was a massive, deadly earthquake that claimed the lives of over 90,000 people, and it displaced more than 1.5 million people. So naturally, having been to Haiti myself, I can see why people are traveling to the United States to seek a better life. Lastly, there's just overall social factors, whether it's people seeking better education, combined with the health and safety of their family, combined with better economic conditions. All these are social factors which drive people seeking a better life and why they find themselves at our southern border. But again, for me personally, this is something really important because from traveling to Ecuador in 2003, when I was a junior at John Carroll University, I saw firsthand some of the conditions in Latin America that drive people to come here to the United States. We flew into Guayaquil and then spent most of our time in a little town called Duran, Ecuador. And then outside of Duran, we went to a community called Vente de Ocho. In that community was basically founded on a garbage dump. And there was thousands of people just living on garbage, looking for the next meal. Now, all the other kids that I'd met in Ecuador, I could use some of my broken Spanish to make a joke. And the kids would laugh, and we would kind of make that connection. When I got to Vente de Ocho, though, and I saw some of the kids, there was just absolutely no joy. I jumped out of the van. I smelled the refuse, a smell that will never leave me. I saw the buzzards flying up ahead. And the first young man that I encountered, probably about 7 years old, was crawling through the garbage. He looked up at me. I smiled and tried to make some type of human connection. But he just went right back to the garbage. You know, he was so hungry. I think it was Gandhi who said, in fact, that some people are so hungry in this world that God can only appear to them in the form of bread. And so for this young man, he was so hungry. The only thing that young man could think about was trying to find a meal in the trash. And so I know firsthand, again, not only from traveling to Ecuador, but to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, where I've taken 2 trips to spend 2 weeks there, how desperate the circumstances can be. In a little part of Port-au-Prince, there's a place called Cirque du Soleil, which the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's order, work. And in Cirque du Soleil, the mothers actually take mud, and they take what little vegetables they have, and they mix them in the mud, and then they bake them in the sun. And it is that little mud cake that they give to their kids for their daily sustenance. So the poverty there is just, it's truly striking, and it's truly sad. You know, I think it's hard for us here in the United States of America to fathom that type of poverty. This really was brought home to me when I was helping the Missionaries of Charity in a particular after-school program, and I was with the kids during the school day and then also afterwards. And a part of the school day, the sisters would give the young students some food, and it was there that I met Kai. Kai was just a joyful young little boy living there in Port-au-Prince. But I was struck that every day, Kai would eat half the food that was given to him. The other half, though, he would take a newspaper out of his pocket, and he would put the food into the newspaper and then stuff it into his pants. When I saw this, I went to the sisters and I said, "Sisters, he's only eaten half of his food, and even the spaghetti, he took the spaghetti and wrapped it up in newspaper, and then he stuffed it in his pants. I mean, what should I do?" And they said, "Peter, let him go. He's taking that back to his family, and that's the only food that his family will have for a meal today." You know, again, it's hard for us to fathom in what is the wealthiest country here in the world, individuals really struggling for daily sustenance, for daily food. But that's the reality I saw in Port-au-Prince. And I saw in other areas, in other tent cities, where individuals and their hair had turned from black to orange because of malnutrition, not getting the nutrients they needed on every day. So when we talk about economic factors or just basic food that people need, we can see why individuals are literally dying often to get into this country, and they're willing to take great risks to come into the United States of America. Some of the conditions in the third world are really that destitute. So let us go now to the numbers. Let us look at just a broad view of immigration here in the United States. The United States has more immigrants than any other country in the entire world. Today, more than 40 million people living in the United States were born in another country. That's accounting for about 1/5 of the world's migration. Most immigrants, 77% of immigrants, are here in the country legally, while about 25% or so then are here illegally or undocumented. That makes up about 10.5 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S., according to Pew Center research in 2017. So that accounts for about 3.2% of our total population here in the United States. More than 1 million immigrants arrive in the U.S. each year. In 2008, the top countries, you may be surprised, where new immigrants came in from were China, with about 150,000 people, India, 129,000 people, Mexico, 120,000, and the Philippines, 46,000. Asians are projected to become the largest immigrant group in the U.S. by 2055, overtaking Hispanics. So nearly half of the immigrants, though, 45% of those immigrants, they live in just 3 states: California with 24%, Texas with 11%, and then Florida with another 10%. And most of those 10.7 illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants live in just 20 major metropolitan areas, with the largest populations in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, according to the UN, there was in 2019 about 800 people who died immigrating in the Americas this past year. So that means people from the Northern Triangle countries that we talked about, Haiti, Mexico, coming to the U.S. border. And that's a tragedy, recognizing that, individuals fleeing, seeking a better life, die, whether it's on our borders or trying to approach the United States of America. Now, let's get to church teaching on this issue. Again, the first couple episodes, the three issues that we covered, the right to life concerning the abortion issue, marriage being between a man and a woman, and the fact that individuals have religious freedom. Those are non-negotiable issues for Catholics. That means we can't disagree on those issues. We have to believe those things. They're core to who we are as a people of faith. Now, when we look at the issue of immigration as a church, we recognize that we can have prudential differences in how to approach immigration. So Catholics, when approaching these issues, we could have differences of opinion when it comes to how many immigrants should be allowed into the country each year. We could have differences of opinion, prudential differences, when it comes to should undocumented immigrants have licenses or not. A Catholic in good conscience could have prudential differences when it comes to this issue. But make no mistake, the Catholic is required to act. We do recognize that one thing that we can't disagree on is the dignity and value of every single human person, including the immigrants among us. That's why the USCCB teaches us when it comes to all these issues affecting the human person, that racism and other unjust discrimination, the use of the death penalty, resorting to unjust war, environmental degradation, the use of torture, war crimes, the failure to respond to those who are suffering from hunger or a lack of health care or housing, pornography, human trafficking, redefining civil marriage, compromising religious liberty, or unjust immigration policies are all serious moral issues that challenge our consciences and require us to act. So I know this might be challenging to some of us, but the church does challenge us in welcoming the stranger in 2000 when she writes that the church supports the human rights of all people and offers them pastoral care, education, and social services, no matter what the circumstances of entry into this country. And it works for the respect of the human dignity of all, especially those who find themselves in desperate circumstances. That is why the Catholic Church and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops have called for comprehensive immigration reform. Quote, "The gospel mandate to welcome the stranger requires Catholics to care for and stand with newcomers, authorized and unauthorized, including unaccompanied immigrant children, refugees and asylum seekers, those unnecessarily detained, and victims of human trafficking. Comprehensive reform is urgently necessary to fix a broken immigration system and should include a broad and fair legalization program with a path to citizenship, a work program with worker protections and just wages, family reunification policies, access to legal protections, which include due process procedures, refuge for those fleeing persecution and violence, and policies to address the root causes of migration. The right and responsibility of nations to control their borders and to maintain the rule of law should be recognized, but pursued in a just and humane manner. The detention of immigrants should be used to protect public safety and not for purposes of deference or punishment. Alternatives to detention, including community-based programs, should be emphasized." Also involved in this issue of immigration, because unfortunately the United States is one of the largest traffickers or one of the largest perpetrators of human trafficking, is this issue of human trafficking even at our border. So that's why the USCCB continues in their commentary on the issue of immigration to look at what Pope Francis has said about human trafficking. Human trafficking is a crime against humanity and should be eradicated from the earth. Trafficking victims, most especially children, should receive care and protection, including special consideration for permanent legal status. Additional education and mobilization efforts are needed to address the root causes of human trafficking: poverty, conflict, and the breakdown of the judicial process in source countries. And Pope Francis has been really a champion for immigrants and migrant rights. In 2014, he said this: "Migrants and refugees are not pawns on the chessboard of humanity. They are children, women, and men who leave or who have forced to leave their homes for various reasons, who share a legitimate desire for knowing and having, but above all, for being more. So that is why, again, the USCCB has called us to welcome the foreigner in our midst. Welcoming refugees is an act of love and hope. By helping to resettle the most vulnerable, we are living out the Christian faith as Jesus has challenged us to do. By welcoming the foreigner, we are living out our Christian faith as Christ has called us to do. Look, all the way from Abraham to Christ himself, the charism of hospitality is core to who we are as Christians, to welcome those who are in great need. So let's take a look at the party platforms and what do they say about the issue of immigration. Again, a just very simple question we need to ask ourselves is, which party platform is the closest to church teaching on the issue of immigration? The Democratic Party's platform can be found on page 61 through 63. And because it's so long, just as the Republicans' part on the issue of immigration, I won't read it at length, but here are a few highlights. Out of many, we are one. That bedrock American idea has animated our country from its earliest days, inspiring people from every corner of the earth to participate in our great democratic experiment. The Trump administration has repudiated that idea and abandoned our values as a diverse, compassionate, and welcoming country. Instead of pursuing a sensible, humane, and responsible approach to immigration that strengthens the United States, the Trump administration has been callous, cruel, and reckless in the extreme. President Trump's immigration policies have made our communities less safe, undermined our economy, and tarnished our image around the world. The Democratic Party continues, though, to acknowledge that immigration issues have extended well beyond the Trump administration. The truth is that our immigration system was broken long before President Trump came into office, and his departure alone won't fix it. Immigrants are essential to our society and our economy. Immigrants are a part of our families. They enrich our culture. They grow our food, care for our loved ones, serve in our armed forces, and provide critical healthcare services. Immigrants make America stronger. Not only do immigrants support us, immigrants are us, our families and our communities, our congregations and our schools. Our businesses, large and small, have been built and sustained through the inclusion of immigrants. That's why Democrats commit to building a 21st century immigration system that reflects our values, repairs past harms, heals our communities, rebuilds our economy, and renews our global leadership. We will start by righting the wrongs of the Trump administration. Now let's take a look at the Republican Party platform and what she has to say concerning the issue of immigration. Quote, "Our party is a natural home for those who come in search of freedom and justice. We welcome all to the great opportunity party. Our immigration system must protect the American working families and their wages for citizens and legal immigrants alike in a way that will improve the economy. Just as immigrant labor helped build our country in the past, today's legal immigrants are making vital contributions in every aspect of national life. Their industry and commitment to American values strengthens our economy, enriches our culture, and enables us to better understand and more effectively compete with the rest of the world. We are particularly grateful to the thousands of new legal immigrants, many of them not yet citizens, who are serving in the armed forces and among first responders." The party platform, however, continues that in a time of terrorism, drug cartels, human trafficking, and criminal gangs, the presence of millions of unidentified individuals in this country poses grave risks to the safety and sovereignty of the United States. Our highest priority, therefore, must be to secure our borders and all ports of entry and to enforce our immigration laws. That is why we support building a wall along our southern border and protecting all ports of entry. You can find more about the Republican Party platform in pages 25 and 26. So lastly, my brothers and sisters, as I want to end with a call to you, when we talk about this issue of immigration, to remember to bring all three Catholic principles to bear on the issue. That is, first and foremost, the dignity of the human person. Every immigrant, documented and undocumented among us, and those we disagree with on this issue. Secondly, we must recognize that for a nation to be sovereign, it has laws, and a nation has a right to enforce those laws. Otherwise, it ceases to be a nation. Lastly, it's important that we welcome the foreigner. As a prosperous nation, as maybe the most prosperous nation in the history of the world, the United States can do great good. It can welcome immigrants to our borders, recognizing that they contribute so much to our culture and society. And so let me end this episode with a story. It's about my little buddy, Sergio. As I mentioned in last week's episode, I spent a year of my life in Immokalee, Florida. Immokalee is a place where many immigrants come crossing the border to work in the fields to pick tomatoes and peppers that we end up buying in our air conditioning grocery stores. Now, many of those immigrants, they come across the border illegally, and they're paid pennies on the dollar because they are illegal. And since I know that there are many undocumented or illegal immigrants in Southwest Florida, I'm sure that our government does as well. But the harsh reality is our government sometimes doesn't take action there because they're an important part to our agricultural economy. Look, this is why the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has called us to comprehensive immigration reform, to recognize the needs that the United States have for hard workers, but also recognize that there's individuals who are seeking a better life. Can't we mesh these two needs together when it comes to immigration policy? Well, Sergio was one of those young boys who actually came across the border with his family. And I met Sergio in the after-school program that I was working at in Immokalee. It was for the Guadalupe Center, and it was a place for those young students to be while their family and their parents were still in the fields. Many of the families, they would begin working at 5 a.m., both mom and dad, and they wouldn't get home sometimes until 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. working in those fields. Now, the after-school program, I was given the first graders. Now, can you imagine? I've never had any teaching experience, and I was put in charge of 21 first graders. So I came in highly prepared. I had my sticker chart ready. I had my lesson plans all ready to go. But nothing can ever prepare you for 21 first graders. And for some of those first graders, English was their second language. So we had students from Haiti, from Mexico, from Guatemala. So it was a challenge. But you know what? A couple weeks in, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. I was like, wow, I actually have control of the classroom, and they seem to respect me and appreciate what I'm teaching them. But I wasn't prepared for Sergio. Sergio one day in class raised his hand and said, "Mr. Pete, my tooth hurts." So I said, "Sergio, I'm really sorry that your tooth hurts, but we got to get back to our lesson." 2 minutes went by and Sergio's hand goes up again. "Mr. Pete, my tooth hurts." "I'm sorry, Sergio, why don't you go ahead and get a drink of water?" Sergio went over to the water fountain, then came back to his seat, and we continued with the lesson. 2 minutes later, though, again, Sergio raises his hand. "Mr. Pete, my tooth hurts." "All right, Sergio, let's go to the water fountain. I'll take a look." So I went over to the water fountain, and Sergio opened his mouth so I could take a look at his tooth that was hurting. And what I saw will always kind of stick with me. Every one of Sergio's teeth seemed like they were hurting because they were all covered in a thick blackness. Each one of his teeth had really severe cavities, and I could see now very clearly why Sergio's teeth were hurting. I took Sergio to the principal of the after-school program after class and kind of explained the situation and just wanted to see if there was any way that we could help or understand Sergio's family situation. And after a little investigation, the principal did find out that Sergio was living in a trailer with 2 other families. And this trailer didn't have any running water or sewage system. And so Sergio's family, every week, because they were being paid so cheaply, they had to make a choice. Were they going to spend money on food or on non-essential items like toothpaste? And so I wasn't even sure if Sergio even ever had the opportunity to ever brush his teeth. My brothers and sisters, I've seen some pretty difficult circumstances as I've described in third world countries, whether Ecuador or Haiti. But what I wasn't prepared for was to see that third world poverty right here in the United States of America. You see, we've created this kind of second-class citizenry in our own nation when it comes to the undocumented among us. We need to change our immigration policies to reflect the realities that our country is facing today. So I just want to encourage you, and I understand that people have really strongly held beliefs on either side of the immigration issue. And I recognize again that you can be a good Catholic and have prudential differences in how you approach this immigration issue. But I think fundamentally at the core of our heart is to be like Jesus as best we can. And Jesus is someone who showed us how to love people, how to welcome people, how to reach out to people in desperate circumstances. And so when we talk about these very important issues, when it comes to the issue of immigration and, again, how many immigrants should come into our country and what rights they should or should not have based upon their legal status, let's remember that every immigrant is made in the image and likeness of God. And let us remember that every individual that we disagree with on this issue, whether they're on the right or the left, they too are made in the image and likeness of God and is deserving of our love, our care, and our respect. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Catholic Vote as we tackle the issue of immigration. Next week, I can't wait to continue looking at these issues of consequence as we prepare to vote this November in the presidential election. We'll see you next week. God bless.
This show and all media on Awaken Catholic is made possible by the Awaken Nation and the Hallow app. The Awaken Nation is a community of people like you who support all things Awaken for as cheap as a cup of coffee a week and get access to exclusive content. Learn more by visiting awakencatholic.org/donate. Hallow is the only audio-guided Catholic prayer app focused on contemplative prayer and traditional Catholic meditation such as Lectio Divina, Daily Examen, and the Rosary. We here at Awaken all use Hallow every day and love it. To learn more or give it a try, visit hallow.app/awaken.